Welcome to the Doctor's Corner with Dr. KLINE and JONELLE ELGAWAY. Okay, Call Nation, I know you've been waiting for them, so here they are, Dr. KLINE and JONELLE ELGAWAY.
Good evening and welcome to the Doctor's Corner on KLINE Network for your daily dose of truth with co-host Dr. KLINE and I'm JONELLE ELGAWAY. There are two ways to listen into tonight's program: through our website www.cawnatation.com or YouTube channel The Doctor's Corner, where you can live chat with the audience. Please make sure to click subscribe to all of Call360 Network's YouTube channels. If you would like to become a part of the Call360 Network tribe and volunteer or have future mailbag questions you would like to ask Dr. KLINE, please email them to jonelle.elgaway@caw360.com. Before we get into tonight's show, welcome Dr. KLINE, and how are you this beautiful sunny evening?
I'm just dandy, thank you.
Is there anything newsworthy that occurred recently that you would like to share with us?
I did find an interesting statistic that 61% of people who are considering or taking pain medicines are afraid of becoming addicted. And I have kind of made the flat statement before that it struck me that 2/3 to 3/4 of people in the United States are truly afraid of these medicines. And of course, the fire got lit behind that by the CDC that pretty much says they don't work, they're dangerous, you could die or become addicted. So 61% of people are afraid of becoming addicted. It's not true. Once you're taking an opiate medication, you will never, ever addict. If you didn't addict in the first place, you never will, because it's a genetic disease. And people are going to learn more about genetic diseases when we at JATH, Educational Consortium, begin to publish little papers bringing forth the truth about that. But here's an example. The Mississippi court system took custody of a woman's children, 3 children, because she took opiate medication. So that is the extent of the fear of addiction phobia, that a judge would take a woman's children away from her because she took pain medicine. The other thing that's interesting is every time I read something about opioids, it never says opioid pain medicine. So when you're talking to people or you're reading something, substitute the words pain medicine for opioid and see what it starts to sound like. Because there's only 2 medicines that we have that are pain medicines: opiates from the poppy plant and Tylenol. There are no other painkillers, period. So it's okay to talk about pain medicine in articles and with your friends without sticking the word opiate in the front of it. I do sometimes when I'm writing, but you don't have to, because everybody knows you're not talking about Tylenol. So it's interesting. You can see the depth of the fear of addiction phobia, the terrible bias and prejudice and hatred that goes along with prejudice for people who take these medicines. Imagine losing your children. Just terrible. So that's the news for this evening. Do you have mailbag questions?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we have mailbag questions. The first one is, there has been a long-standing claim that marijuana helps patients with painful diseases. When I tried various types of cannabinoids, or CBD oil, is it in effect placebo, or is there validity to the claims?
We did a Twitter poll and we asked people if marijuana relieved their pain, and they said no. But if combined with pain medicines, they said yes, it helped a little. like another 10 or 15% in the pain control. So I have no objections to the drugs. It's safe. Nobody's ever died from smoking marijuana. There is addiction to marijuana, but we use the definition use of substance to the point of ruining your life. So most people don't ruin their lives, and therefore they do not have addiction. It's up to them whether they want to break the law. Some states where it's legal. So give it a try. CBD oil is from the hemp plant. It's different. It's not. It is in the big cannabinoid family, but it is not. You don't get high from it. And anecdotal cases, and admittedly it's anecdotal. Just people telling me. It helps with withdrawal. It helps you feel better. It helps you sleep. So whether or not that's placebo, if the stuff is safe and it's not too expensive, big deal. I mean, how you know if it's placebo or not? You have to do a great big study to find that out, and I haven't seen any yet. So give it a try. I mean, I can't recommend against it. Let's put it that way. So.
How do I reassure my doctors about DEA investigations?
The best thing is to call up the DEA regional office and say, my doctor is afraid that he's going to be raided. How can I reassure him? See what they say.
Okay. All right. So tonight we have several patients calling in to share their horror stories they've experienced at their pain clinic. I wanted to thank everyone that offered to share their experiences. We will have more shows in the near future where we'd love to have you share your story. Each one of you is so important, and your experience are as well. So we all need to be heard. So our first guest tonight is going to be Rob. And Rob, welcome to the Doctor's Corner. How are you this evening?
Thanks. No, I'm doing well.
Good. So can you please tell us what illness you have and how long you've had it?
Well, I have a bad back, and it was diagnosed back in 1990. Back then it was called a degenerative disc disease, and I was 27 at the time, and I'd been a tennis pro. I was teaching tennis at a club, and 15 years of hardcore tennis, and, every now and then the back went out, but never knew that, I had degenerative disc disease. Well, they threw me in the MRI when I was 27 because I had a pretty serious back injury, and that's when the diagnosis came through. So it's been getting worse ever since. Been on the pain medicines for years, no problems at all. And so now being... So
what's your story for this evening?
Mm-hmm. What's that?
What's your story for this evening that you wanted to share, your horror story?
Yeah, I was surprised. I went to the pharmacy yesterday, and Norcam, a doctor didn't tell me he was prescribing Norcam at all. So I show up at the pharmacy, and they pull out Norcam out of the bag, and I didn't know what it was. And I said, what's that? And they said, oh, well, this is what's coming along with all the medicine. And I go, well, I don't think I need that. I've never OD'd or ever had a problem with this. And so I guess I was lucky because I wasn't forced to take it home with me. So I have a good reputation or good, rapport with my pharmacist, the manager there. So he just said, that's fine. I'll just put it back in the bag and return it. But I thought, is this what they're forcing on patients now? Is Norcam?
It's part of the what I call the CDC guideline fallout. So we're going to start looking and publishing things about the fallout. One of the things about the fallout is fear of addiction, phobia. And when people don't know what to do, they just start running around doing anything. Does this sound good, George? Yeah, let's give everybody Narcan. And guess what happened to the price of Narcan? Tripled.
Yeah.
Tripled.
And this, all this after now they cut us in half. The lucky ones are cut in half. Some aren't getting their medicine at all, of course. But I'm among the lucky ones. I consider myself. Where was the Norcam years ago when I was getting twice as much medicine?
Well, they're giving it to the wrong people because the CDC data of the 40,000, 15,000, 30,000, whatever the number is, people dying of overdose are dying in the streets from heroin addiction. They're not dying in communities under doctor's care. There's only 500 people in the entire United States dying every year from overdose, and even those are suspicious of failing to do proper investigations as to why they died. Just because they had, blood levels, it doesn't mean they didn't die of a heart attack. So they don't. But anyway, if let's just assume there were 500 people, you're going to hand out. There's 25 million people getting pain medicines. 10 million of them getting them every day. So we're going to hand out 25 million doses of something that costs $300. And so, can anybody do the math?
Well, that's the question I have, though. Do you have to get a thing of it every time you go pick up a pain prescription? And then also, say if you ask for it, one time, are they going to report you and think that maybe you'd had an overdose?
Yeah, good point. And it's frightening patients away from using these wonderful medicines. I'm finding that the patients are more reticent than I am to take the medicines that I prescribe because they're afraid something's going to happen. Then they go to the pharmacist, hey, you might die. You just need this Narcan inject in yourself if you overdose. I just decline it, especially because it's a big waste of money. So 25 million times 100 is what? 25, 200, that's 2.5. That sounds like about $3 billion. Anybody got their little calculator? So we're going to spend $3 billion and we're giving the Narcan to the wrong people.
Is there a street market value for it too?
That's just what I was thinking, Yeah. Hey, people in the streets don't want to die. As a matter of fact, the reason rural areas have more addicts is because they find out the police department has put Narcan on their police and fire and rescue vehicles. So they move there so they won't die. So these drugs should be in the streets. They should be given to folks that have heroin addiction disease because we don't provide them with medical care. They make these futile, flimsy attempts every once in a while to say they're treating them, but they aren't. So we're going to give out millions and millions of doses of Narcan to people that are not going to die, and then we don't give them to the people with the real disease. It's interesting that the CDC's main concern was all these deaths, and since they all occurred in the addiction community, why aren't we doing something about the death rate in the addiction community? One country I read about where they decriminalized drugs and brought heroin addicts in for treatment, their death rate crashed 80%. Now, if we have 40,000 people a year dying in the streets from overdose, 80% of that's 32,000. We could save 32,000 lives a year simply by bringing people into treatment. And we could certainly cut down the number of deaths if we, got some Narcan out there. Actually, the best thing is this thing right here. Just happen to have it out. This is called a bag and a mask. Comes in a little box. You can pull it out. And there you go. See that? Let's see. Does that show up? All right, you put that. You can save their lives. $60. So you can breathe for them.
The other thing, is this covered by insurance?
One of these, you can get one for $25. Screw the insurance companies. Just go out and buy it yourself. Oh, they would never do anything as practical as that. They would rather pay $300 for the Narcan.
Yeah, it's so interesting how misplaced this is. I mean, like maybe if you were at a rehab facility or something, but why give it to patients?
Well, because we don't know what we're doing. You see, when people are frightened, they run around because they don't know what to do, and they do anything. They have big committees. There was one down in Georgia. They had 40 people on it, all sitting around, leaning on their elbows, going, Not too many doctors on it, but we're going to solve the problem with committees. But anyway, that's an interesting story about the Narcan. As far as I'm concerned, anybody who's been taking their medicines prescribed by a doctor doesn't need Narcan.
Rob, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, how did it make you feel? Like, I mean, when that happened, because, when you called me yesterday to tell me about this, you were very upset, obviously, and your doctor didn't even share with you that he, prescribed it.
I'm wondering, that was my question. Did the doctor prescribe it?
No, I see what you're saying. No, they're getting around it. The pharmacists are allowed to give it out, which is sort of odd. It should be under prescription control. But with this fear of addiction phobia, people are just running around doing anything, Put boards on the windows, though the fiends will be getting in. No.
So the doctor likely didn't know this then, correct?
Right. As a matter of fact, call up your physician and say, hey, they were trying to give me Narcan that cost $300, and I don't think I'm ever going to overdose. Did you prescribe it? Yeah, and find out. Let the physicians know.
Especially on half the dose, we'd have to make the medicine last now. I would never take too much now. I'm running out as it is at the end of the month.
Right.
So it's just crazy. I want to ask a question about a little contradiction here with pain patients, cancer patients who go on the pump. Isn't it said that they don't overdo the pump, that they don't take more than they need? So isn't there a double standard here with the chronic pain community, the medicines?
Of course.
Yeah.
You see, the pumps cost $25,000 to $30,000 to install, and another couple thousand a month. And people that I've talked to with the pumps have never really had a full attempt at oral medication, pills. If you really got your back against the wall and the pills are not working, patches are not working, then you might be a candidate for one of these pain pumps. But you got this foreign body inside of you, and these things get infected. And in one case, the doctor who was filling the thing, once a month, is quit and left, and then she had to run around trying to find somebody who would fill her pump. These things are not.
I was talking about the psychology of it, though. In other words, it's the same with chronic pain patients and taking pills. You're not going to overdose if you're a legitimate chronic pain patient. You've been taking your medicine responsibly. It's the same narrative as if you're hooked up to a pump. Isn't that pretty much the contradiction there? And how?
Yeah, I think it is. And so appreciate it. And
thank you so much for calling in, Rob.
Yeah, thank you for all your.
Also, Dr. Mark Ibsen mentioned too that people wake up violently when they come out of the Narcan. Isn't that true?
If you're have the addiction gene and you're a real type 2 heroin addict, yes, it cleans out your receptors and you just go into an instant withdrawal, which is pretty horrible. Right. It'd be like smoking. Anybody who's smoked and has tried to withdraw the first 24 hours are pretty terrible. And just suppose somebody could give you an injection and force you into this withdrawal,
Yeah. All right, we're ready for our next caller. Our next caller is Jessie. Jessie, welcome to the Doctor's Corner. How are you this evening?
I'm hanging in there the best I can. Pretty sore and banged up, feeling pretty banged up tonight.
I bet. Well, I know you just had surgery. Jessie, what is your rare and painful disease that you deal with, and how long have you had it?
CRPS, and I was diagnosed in 2012, but I had symptoms longer than that, dating back to 2009.
Okay. And what's your horror story that you'd like to share that you've experienced at a pain clinic?
It was my old pain clinic. One before I went to the current better pain management doctor I'm at now. He was pretty much, he kept telling me had to get sympathetic nerve block after sympathetic nerve block and all that, just get my monthly pain medication. And then right there, June 2016, and some of the language, and I'm warning you, this is what he said verbatim. He said, you keep getting your effing nerve blocks, or get the effing spinal cord stimulator, or you can get out of my effing office and kiss my effing, you know what, goodbye.
Wow.
Where was this?
And back in June 2016, I told him, I said, you can kiss my butt, goodbye. I'm not going to take your abuse no more. I'm not getting no more of the injections. And to this day, I still have the pain from the injections, where the injection sites were.
How many injections did he give you?
He gave me a total of 14 from 2013 to from March 2014 to June 2016.
Now, did he cut off your pain medicines when you had this row?
He gave me a month's worth so I could find me another doctor.
Okay. And were you able to find another physician?
Yeah, my primary care went back and got his pain management credentials. Now he handles all my care, and he is utmost and professional with me.
Excellent.
The other day,
Excellent.
and I let him know the other day. I wanted to let him know what they give me right after surgery. I asked him if I was in violation of my pain agreement. He said no, and he said, quit worrying about it. He said, even if you would have accidentally done something, he said, I wouldn't have done anything to you, because he said, you've been honest and upfront with me from day one.
Yeah, according to a survey done by Marcy Sowers up in Alaska, she did a nice survey of people that she knew, 450 with pain. It said that 3/4 of people were shifted over to pain management, to a pain clinic. This is definitely something that's fallout from the CDC. I've been doing this since 1973, and we didn't have pain clinics up until the time of the publication of the guidelines. The doctors took care of it. 90% of patients wanted their doctors to take care of it anyway. But the sneaky thing about the CDC guidelines was it was set up to advise primary care doctors. So what's the backhanded message there? Hey, you don't know what you're doing. So we're going to give you these guidelines. And the guidelines are, for God's sake, don't give any opiate pain medicine. I mean, what's going on here? You know, you dumb doctors. And then, technically, it only was for primary care doctors. So what are all these pain specialists at pain clinics doing? Cutting people off and saying you got to get injections first. So, you know, basically, this is an unregulated industry. It's popped up in the last 3 years. It's fallout from the fraudulent CDC guidelines, which I now will be happy to say publicly are fraudulent, because fraudulent means you are telling something that's not true for an alternative reason. That's what fraud is. So, in other words, they are using studies done by their own cronies that, when you read them carefully, are not very well constructed studies, and they make conclusions that are not appropriate for the study they're speaking of. So you can see the bias just leaking out, from these studies that they use to support their position of don't use opiates, they're no good and they're dangerous, which is not true.
So Jessie, have you had any other issues since then, and is your current pain doctor a lot better?
Yeah, he is. He is more professional, and for him to tell me quit worrying like I was the other day, that I was in violation because I'd gotten something through my IV just to take the edge off my post-op, initially post-operative surgery thing. For him to tell me that was reassuring.
You cannot restrict medical care. This is more fallout from the CDC. In other words, people are getting away with murder, These clinics are making tons of money. We are now spending more money on urine drug tests than the entire Environmental Protection Agency spends on their tasks, just from urine testing, several $billion. So
Right.
they have no right to restrict your medical care with a contract. I mean, where are the lawyers? My gosh.
Well, not only
You know?
that, I mean, like these urine tests, I mean, they're not 100% accurate.
Matter of fact, I just saw some data. They're 30% off in terms of making wrong diagnoses, and they're about the same 30% off in making a correct diagnosis.
Wow.
So they're basically completely worthless. You might as well flip a coin. But they're using to destroy people's medical care. They're destroying lives with these urine tests at these clinics. Did you have to get urine tests when you were at that clinic?
Jessie?
Yeah, and it felt like it was more frequently than other patients. It felt like I was a target of his. He didn't like me because I was so young, and that was basically part of the fallout.
Part of the fallout, yeah. And you know, they I think the docs can make about 150. I have to look into this more, but Medicare was paying $150 for these screening tests, and I doubt they're paying that much for them. They get the cheapest ones they can. And so, you know, tacked onto your fee, I mean, the average visit's probably $300 to $400. You know, the average visit in an office, a primary care office, is probably $125. You know, so they're making 3 or 4 times more money per patient.
Well,
cranking people through.
Not only that, I know a patient in Indiana, and they are making her do 3 tests every 3 months, a blood test, a urine test, and now, which by the way, this takes 5 companies to do, they are sending from the pharmacist somebody to your house to do a swab in your mouth for your pH level. Can you believe that? They're this test trial or something.
Well, you see, this is what happens when the government interferes with the practice of medicine and then doesn't supervise what happens.
Right.
You see, this is being irresponsible. In other words, it'd be like if I was some crooked doctor and I didn't know what I was doing, you know, and I was handing out antidepressants and antibiotics and stuff, you know, that people didn't need, you know, and then I didn't do anything about it or call them up and see how they were doing. That's what the CDC is doing. You know, or they'll call and say, Dr. KLINE, the stuff you gave me is making me break out in a rash. Well, too bad. You know, I mean, that's an example of practicing medicine and not providing follow-up, and that's exactly what the CDC is doing. And get your pencils out. There's a federal law, 42 U.S.C., United States Code, that means United States law, 1395, Section 1801. Read it. It specifically says the federal government cannot interfere with the practice of medicine. So, bingo. And I did find in the CDC regulations, so of course nobody's ever read them. They are so poorly put together, 50 single-space pages. I mean, I try every once in a while to add some more. It's the worst piece of scientific writing I've ever seen in 40 years. And I've got 6,000 papers in my office on diabetes and on opiates. It's the worst paper I've ever seen. It's written in a way that makes it impossible to read. So then everybody, like the DEA and the Justice Department and a lot of states, we're going to adopt the CDC regulations, but we're not going to spend the time to actually read them. We're just going to adopt them. I mean, that's the level of science with the CDC, who needs to be hauled up immediately before Congress and to explain themselves. So do we have another caller with a pain clinic problem?
Yep. Thank you, Jessie, so much for calling in. And now I'd like to welcome Kaylee. Kaylee, welcome to the Doctor's Corner. How are you?
Hi, Janelle. I'm good. How are you today?
Good, thank you. So can you please tell us what your rare and painful disease is and how long you've had it?
Yes, I have stiff person syndrome, and I've had it just about 10 years now.
Okay, this is a muscle problem that you have?
It is. So I have an atypical presentation, partly because I was diagnosed so young from what I understand. and it makes my body go into spasms in very unnatural positions, and I can stay like that for days. I've had spasms last weeks, even months.
Okay. And what do you do to relieve these?
So I've tried anything anyone can think of. I've gone through chemotherapy, plasmapheresis, IVIG therapy, out-of-pocket stem cell therapy. Nothing worked. And it was not for lack of trying until the first time I was administered opioids. And it was a miracle drug for me.
Wow.
As it is for so many. And it saved my life.
It's interesting that another physician that I'm working with in New Jersey pointed me in the direction of a bunch of scientific papers. It appears that opiate pain medicine is anti-inflammatory. How about that?
I've heard that. I would love to read more on that because I've heard that, and it makes so much sense.
Because I don't know a whole lot about your disease. I was a pediatrician. I remember diagnosing people when they're babies with this. Is it an inflammatory disease? If they do, have you had biopsies?
I have, and from what I've been told, of course, there's not a whole lot of research on it because it is such a rare condition, but mostly relating to the muscle and misfiring of the brain.
Okay, so you found this wonder drug that's cheap and safe. And when I say safe, people jump all over me. They just go crazy. Safe. What are you talking about? Well, it is safe. When we say a drug is safe, that means it doesn't have a lot of hidden side effects. It can have a major adverse effect. Like, for example, did you know that Tylenol has a black box warning from the FDA for a rare and fatal skin disease? So the same thing,
in other words, fascinating point.
Yeah, the pain medicine, opiate pain medicine, has a side effect of triggering an addiction in those with the genes. So, but it's still a safe drug. Once you take your very first dose or second dose and you don't go to the moon, it means you're not going to addict ever. It now becomes a totally safe drug. So anyway, this has changed your life. So you went to a pain clinic. Tell us that story.
So I was going to my following physician for years until opioid reform began. And as a result, I was forced into a pain clinic. The problem was it took me a very long time to find one for a few reasons, one of which being I have a very rare condition and I only respond to high-dose opioids. Now, what I found, and this was over the course of multiple visits to multiple pain clinics, was that everybody wanted to install a pain pump. Now, if there's anyone that isn't a candidate for an intrathecal catheter, it's me. My spine bends backwards. My head can literally touch my back because it bends so severely, and I've fractured vertebrae. So this was not an option for me. And when I would tell this to a pain physician, immediately it was, well, there's nothing I can do for you.
No pain pills for you.
Finally, I find exactly. It was only the pain pump, and I had multiple letters from countless physicians saying, you can't do this. She cannot have a pain pump installed, and that didn't matter. So finally, I did find a physician who was immediately, I'm up for the challenge. They were 3.5 hours away from me. And, I will tell you, hindsight is 20/20 because there were definitely some red flags. But I immediately started to drive down there, and I was going weekly. Now, and of course, that takes a toll on your body. She was performing urine drug tests and, whatever she had to do, she had to do. I was just grateful to have a following physician at this point. So I walk into her office one day, and she tells me that I have a balance, and she wants this balance cleared immediately. And I can't quite figure out why, but whatever, we discussed that. And when we sit down in her office, she pulls out a packet, and this packet is from Medicare and Medicaid. And it's very important to this story for me to tell you, I'm not on Medicare or Medicaid. I have private insurance. So this letter did not apply to me specifically, but what that letter was stating was that this physician was over the curve. She was over-prescribing and overcost according to the guidelines and the rules for Medicare and Medicaid. So she looks at me and she says, as a high-dose patient, I'm not willing to have you mess up my numbers. And
wow.
Now this was only months after I had found this doctor. And I will be honest with you, immediately tears came. I have a 5-year-old son. And I said to her, well, what am I going to do? And she looked at me and she said, well, that's not my problem because I have 2 children to put through private school.
Oh.
And I was sent out of that pain clinic with no opioids. And this was, of course, on my fill date. And over the course of the next 48 hours, both of my lungs collapsed, multiple bones broke. And now, of course, in the PDMP, it shows that I haven't had my prescriptions refilled, and that doesn't look good. And I think it brings up a really important point that when we talk about pain medicine, of course, just like any field, we have great physicians and we have physicians that aren't so great. But when it comes to the field of pain medicine, we can't say that physicians aren't great or that somebody has been cruel or that somebody has done the wrong thing, because immediately drug seeking comes to mind of anyone that you're speaking to. As far as the world is concerned, if a doctor didn't give you pain medicine, that means you're an addict. So what immediately hit me was that there was no recourse. And that was, as much as I knew there were things going on, I never knew to the gravity or the extent of what was taking place until it happened to me.
I never thought of that. That's really a good point, that if you don't prescribe something and the police sit around looking in the computers, I mean, that's a pretty easy way for a police officer. Most of them have to get out like Joe Friday, and investigate and do things, but they just sit around looking at the computers. This is a horrible story. You're out of the pain clinic now? You don't go there anymore?
I am out of the pain. I do not. And right away, because I said to her, I was very respectful. It's very important for me to say that I was never aggressive or anything of the sort with this doctor. And immediately, the letter that I got in the mail saying that she had dropped me, I just felt like my records were there was a story being put into my records that had never taken place. And it was strictly out of the fear that she was experiencing. And, that's, of course, I could talk about that for hours, and that's a multifaceted issue. But in the meantime, I remember looking at my son and wondering how much longer I was going to be able to be his mom.
Kaylee, did you file a complaint with your state?
Horrible.
Did you file a complaint with your state
So
medical board?
I will be 100% honest with you when I say that my immediate fear was that my following physician, who actually ended up taking me back, knew this pain doctor. And she went on to do many more things. And I'm not sure how much time we have, so I don't want to bounce into a longer story. But I was so afraid that if I filed a complaint on her, she would retaliate in some way. And I, at this point, was brand new into advocacy and was hearing all these horror stories about retaliatory measures. And I was somebody that, like I said, my lungs were collapsing, bones were breaking. I couldn't survive that period without access to opioid medication. And so, as ashamed as I am to say this, as an advocate today, fear stopped me from filing that complaint.
No, that's perfectly understandable, because And this is what held back the civil rights movement. When black folks are having their rights denied and they complain, what had happened? They can beat them up or kill them. So doctors can retaliate, although I don't hear too much of that. And I would like to say that if you officially complain and go public, there's less likely that they will retaliate. But in your case, with such a severe opiate sensitive disease, I don't blame you one bit.
How long do you get to? Can you file complaints or
that
do
depends
a lawsuit?
that depends on each state. You have to call them up and ask them. But we're also giving people the chance on air to name the clinics. Now, you don't have to do that, but that's just an option that we have because you're now First Amendment. In other words, when you go public on a TV show like this, you have First Amendment protections. It's kind of like, newspapers have protections and stuff. So, you can think about it, and we're giving people the opportunity to name names. And, if somebody retaliates against you, that's even more a serious complaint to make for unprofessional behavior. So there are protections. It does take courage to do this, and each one is different. I'm not saying you have to do this, but just to let our audience know in general, if they want to name names, as long as you're telling the truth and you're not axe grinding, you'll be protected by the First Amendment. Thank God we have one.
Right, and I thank God we have one is right. And honestly, Dr. Kline, I look at each situation, and I have to look at each situation as a mother,
of course,
and as a wife, and as a daughter, and as
sure,
as a human being. And as you said, with such an opioid-sensitive disease, I even, just in terms of my doctor, you start to have such gratitude and love for the physician that refuses to abandon you after a situation like this. That becomes, forefront.
Well, you can also name your doctor. We're kind of getting to the point that this is such a serious wildfire that we're going to name names, and we can name good names too. Yeah. But again, that's you can call up some other time if you want to do that. But I think doctors need support, and if a doctor is doing a good job and, realizes that this is a cruel government cabal, CABAL. That's a good word to look up on your dictionary on your telephone, cabal.
Dr. Ibsen says there's no statute of limitations on bad medical treatment, 7 years for malpractice.
Oh, okay. Yep. So, but check with your state. If you eventually want to file a complaint, call them up and ask them. They're usually really nice when you call the Board of Registration in Medicine and you have a question. They'll usually answer it for you. I've been surprised how nice our North Carolina Medical Board is when people call and have problems. They're not being brushed off. They're actually listening.
Well, thank you, Kaylee, so much for sharing your story. I appreciate
what a
it.
horrible, horrible story, So hang in there, and if you ever have problems, with getting your medicine, you can contact Janelle, and she has a short list of people that can help you out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It was wonderful to speak to both of you, and thank you for the time.
All right.
Thanks. Okay, next we have Mary calling in. Mary, welcome to the Doctor's Corner.
Hello.
How are you? Hello, Mary. How are you this evening?
I'm okay. Thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks. Could you please share what your rare and painful disease is? Yes. Can you please share what your rare and painful disease is and how long you've had it?
Okay. I have systemic inflammatory disease in all my joints with fibromyalgia, and I've also suffered from daily migraines for over 20 years, and I've had cancer twice, and I have chronic back issues. So I have a lot of issues going on besides the systemic inflammatory disease.
Okay.
So have you had a rough time at the pain clinics?
Absolutely. I was on pain medication for many years, and then we moved to North Carolina, and I had to find a pain doctor. Well, at first, my internist was going to take care of it, the new internist that I found. But in the meantime, I needed to find a doctor ASAP because I couldn't wait because of the move, and I would go into withdrawals from my pain medicine. And I just got done having a mastectomy and everything and trying to recuperate from that. So it was like a nightmare coming off of, the breast cancer and everything else. So I went to a pain clinic, and I've been to this pain clinic in North Carolina before, and so I didn't think it was going to be an issue. So when I went to this pain clinic, the doctor says, well, I have a clinic on the other side. Like, he's got two clinics going, one for pain and one for Suboxone or Subutex, either or. And he goes, you got to go to the other side. Well, I didn't know what he meant, go to the other side. So he says, well, what were you on, blah, blah, blah. And I said, this and that. And he says, I can only give you Subutex. And I'm like, okay, not thinking anything about it. I'm like, all right, well, I guess that's better than nothing, So I started taking it, and then I realized, first of all, with the Subutex, I started having a bad reaction. My headaches were flaring, and the inflammatory disease seemed to get worse, not even better, and just crying every day for a month, And the doctor calls me one day, and I said, look, I can't do this. I need to be on some regular pain medicine, some normal, like something I was taking or something. I said, I'm worse off, in serious pain here. And I was crying on the phone. He goes, all right, so come back in. Well, I went back in, and he has me talk to some therapist, and he goes, well, how many pain medications do you think you could get by with? So now I'm afraid, and I'm like, what is going on? So I go to the lowest amount possible I could go to. It's like 3 Percocet a day or something, So in the meantime, we get done with him, and nothing happens. What he does is he has another pain clinic where he has a physician's assistant working. He sends me there, but I didn't know that they were like in cahoots. So I go to this other physician or this other PA and who works with this doctor, which I didn't know, and he puts me on Suboxone and tells me that I have to come in every so often for a count when they call me. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is turning into a freaking nightmare. So he puts me back on the Subutex, which didn't make sense. And, I go through my medical history, and they have my medical records and everything, but it's almost like they're ignoring all that. It's almost like a big money-making machine, these Suboxone clinics or Subutex clinics or whatever they are. So
did they put you through withdrawal, too, immediately when you started taking that?
Well, they wanted me to go through withdrawal for 24 hours before I started it.
Gotcha.
So anyway, so he put me on the Subutex again, and it just wasn't working for me. So I took 1 or 2 extra. Well, apparently that's a no-no. When he did the count, I was 1 or 2 short, and I said, well, you said I can, take more milligrams. He goes, I never said that. You're short. He goes, now instead of getting 3 or 4 a day or whatever, so many hours, I'm cutting you down to 1. Oh, my God. Well, that was it, down to 1. I started crying, and I just walked out and slammed out of there. And I said, that's it. So I went to someone else, and it was the same thing. Now I'm labeled. Now I'm labeled as an addict because they go, well, where did you go over here? I went here and here. Where do they have you on Subutex? So now I'm labeled. So I go to this next pain clinic to try and talk to some sense into this guy. And I said, look, if you're going to just label me as an addict and put me on this and that's it, forget it. Don't waste my time. He goes, no, well, let's see what happens. And he goes, I'll start you off with the buprenorphine, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So anyways, the buprenorphine wasn't working, and I happened to have some, what was it? I think some Vicodin or something at home that were old and stale or whatever. But I said, you know what? This is better than what I'm going through. It was my prescription, and I wasn't wrong. So when I went in for a urine test, he said, you have it was something else other than Vicodin in my system. And, or maybe, I don't know whatever I took, whatever pain medicine I had at that time, whatever it was, they took a urine test, and he told me I had something else in my urine. I don't know if it was morphine or I can't remember, but it was something that I know I didn't take. I go, look, if I took it, I tell you, I have pain medicine with my name on it. It's legal. And if I took it because this stuff isn't working and I'm in pain, I would tell you I'm not lying. I have nothing to lie about, So I told him. So he, so he was like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, forget it. I'm done with you two. I said, that's it. I just can't take this anymore. In the meantime, the other clinic where the PA was sends me a letter in the mail that, if I don't come back there, I'm going to be blackballed at any pain place that I go with the Mission Hospital community that they deal with or whoever they deal with, that I'm going to get blackballed. Well, I just ignored it. I'm like, screw them. This is some kind of conspiracy going on or something, This
So
is
did you get
ridiculous.
blackballed?
Well, I don't know if he did or didn't. He sent me a letter threatening me. He was. I know he probably, maybe he did, and maybe the other doctor he's in cahoots with did. But, from then on, I knew. I says, well, forget it. I don't know where to go from here. I'm just going to have to suffer. And I was feeling like, man, I could see how these people kill themselves over this because, I'm either going to live my life in my house, suffering in pain every day, or kill myself or something. I don't know what else to do here, because when I was in Florida, I had a doctor treating me there with no problem at all. And I saw him for 20 years, and it was great. We had a great relationship, perfect. But, when we moved I couldn't drive back to Florida every month when I needed a prescription, so I couldn't do that. So once I came to North Carolina, I had issues. Then I found a doctor here, and I don't know if you want me to say who it is, but I found a doctor here who said, I'll take you in. And I did, and he's taking care of my situation now, and everything is fine. But the thing is, even so, there's that fear. I'm terrified. I'm afraid that my doctor's going to retire. And because of that, I'm not taking probably as much medication as I should be to get rid of all the pain because I'm hoarding a little bit. I'm like putting a little aside for a rainy day in case this happens.
I think we all do
again to
that.
me.
Yeah. I think a lot of people do that now.
Yeah, pretty horrible story. Yeah, that's really a good story, Mary, and it's a good example of the fallout from the CDC guidelines. In other words, we have such a horrible, horrible problem with all these dope fiends. Wait a minute, dope fiends? Oh, we have this horrible problem about overdose deaths. Well, wait a minute, that's different than dope fiends. Oh, well, aren't they kind of the same? No, they're not the same. And do you know there's been no publications by anyone, CDC or anyone else, to show the amount of addiction has increased? The only thing that's increased are, sadly, deaths in heroin addicts. That's what the CDC stuff's about. So here you are suffering, and because the CDC has just given license to these pain clinics, as I mentioned, I never heard of these pain clinics prior to 3 years ago, and they're just doing whatever they want. It's almost, they talk about pill mills. Good Lord, look at the criminal enterprises that are going on. These people are, they're crapping on the patients, and they're getting away with it, what drives me nuts? A horrible story, Yes, go ahead, Janelle.
So, well, no, in North Carolina, I always see these commercials about, your opioids. Do you have extra opioids in your house? There's so many people dying because of opioids. Da 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 da. Well, I just recently looked at the statistics from last year to this year, and we're actually a few hundred people lower that overdosed and died this time last year than last year, or right now than last year. Why are they I mean, I saw that commercial 3 times within an hour. It drove me crazy.
if it's true, you see, they're going to take credit. They're going to say, see, we need to do more of this to stop these overdose deaths. So wait a minute, what overdose deaths are you talking about?
Right.
Okay, 95% of them are in the street. So you mean restricting Mary's prescription is going to help a person with opiate addiction disease not die? How does that, show me how that works. Where are the reporters asking deep questions? Reporters are supposed to ask follow-up questions. Yeah. Oh, you had more deaths. Who's dying? Can you tell us who's dying? And people are dying. Well, like who? Are these addicts that are dying in the streets because they don't get any medical care? Nobody, brings them in for treatment. Like I say, when countries stop using the police to treat opiate disease, and they brought people in for treatment, 80% of the opioid deaths stopped.
Thank you, Mary, for calling in. And we're going to take our next caller, Stacy. Welcome to the Doctor's Corner. How are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're good, thank you. Could you please share what your rare and painful disease is and how long you've had it?
I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I've had it since birth. It's a genetic disease. I was not diagnosed until September of 2017. So.
And what's your horror story or experience at pain clinics?
Oh, it's long list. My primary care took care of my medication for 15 years. I was working, and up until 2010, I lost my career because of one of many failed spine surgeries. And I was on Soma and Valium and Yorset and Norco and morphine for 15 years and functioned as a normal human being, somewhat. Then we decided that I should go to the pain clinic or the pain doctor where my spine surgeon was. And I was like, okay. I really liked him. He was nice. He agreed with my medication plan. He even increased it, especially for the surgery. I had this is not cool, but I had a posterior fusion from C3 to T2. It was done in the surgeon's surgery center, and I was sent home 2 hours afterwards. I almost died after that surgery from a cellulitis infection. Ended up being put in a coma in one hospital and transferred to another, where the nurses would call me a drug addict when I would come to from my induced coma. And at one point, one of them said, well, here's 450 milligrams of Fioricet fentanyl, and slammed it into my IV. And I just sat there and looked at them like, really? And I found out afterwards through genetic testing that I don't metabolize multiple medications correctly. So why that didn't work for me is because my body doesn't metabolize medication.
Yeah, and I think most palliative care patients, we have very fast we're a fast metabolizer, so it doesn't sit within us as long, which is why I think we are on higher doses of medications. Isn't that correct, Dr. Kline?
That is correct. And the other sad thing about high dose medication is our most common ones that we use, Dilaudid and oxycodone, only come in small pills.
Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know why people don't make a 60 milligram oxycodone instead of only a 30. Because we have to give people 400 and 500 pills, and that gets into the newspaper. Oh my God, 500 pills! The whole community is going to turn into dope fiends with that many. It's a level of ignorance that is really kind of frightening to a modern civilization. And you, with your Ehlers-Danlos, I presume they just treated you as a dope addict at the clinic. I mean, what did they treat you with pain medicines at the pain clinic?
I was up until, let's see, after the coma, my pain doctor was still treating me, and everything was fine. And then I ended up getting mono and a blood clot in my jugular vein in the hospital for a month. All because of stuff that happened during the coma. And my pain doctor left the practice that my surgeon had, and they determined they were not going to give pain meds out anymore. So I come out of the hospital having been put on even higher doses of medications for 2 months because they didn't want me to throw the clot and die. And their interventional pain guy who did all the shots called me a drug seeker. And I'm like, do you not know what I just went through? Your surgeon almost killed me.
God.
And I just kind of tried to find another. I quit my meds, just cold turkey pretty much. I don't go through withdrawals. I tried to find a new doctor after that wasn't really working. The first one looked at me and said, "Oh, we'll get you back to work." And I'm sitting here going, I went through 5 years of getting my disability approved and lost 4 years of back pay, and you're going to ruin this for me? You don't even know anything about me. And I was just in a horrid boating accident that has destroyed my body. I am so screwed right now. It's not even funny. My doctors just look at me like, I can't believe you're smiling. I can't believe you're alive.
Are you getting pain medicine now?
I am. I just had my 5th spine surgery on May 1st.
Oh, God.
I had quit all pain meds for a year and gone to medical marijuana in hopes that would work because it's legal in my state. And it didn't, of course. Yeah. So I found this pain doctor that was touted. He put me on buprenorphine, which I started having serotonin syndrome. And God. It wasn't caught by... I was in the hospital for a month and put on the highest dose. I got out of the hospital. They failed to do the pre-auth to get it approved. So I was thrown into withdrawals from buprenorphine, and let me tell you, that is one of the most evil drugs on this earth.
I've heard the withdrawals.
Half of my hair.
Oh my God!
It lasted 2 months. My heart is affected permanently from that medication. It's on my list of allergies now. It was horrifying, and then he put me back on it again. Luckily, my dogs made me fall, and I ended up in the hospital again, and on morphine and not that, because the hospital I went to didn't carry that medication. And then my pain doctor talked to the hospitalist, and no, she needs to be on that, have her bring it in. Immediately, the symptoms came right back. The heart issues, the sweating, the increased pain. And both of us were like, yeah, no, you don't need that. So he took me off, put me back on the morphine. The pain doctor had no clue that this drug could do this to someone. I left his office.
You wonder about these pain doctors, since they're unregulated, these clinics, they pretty much can do whatever they want. There are people who are trained properly, but there's not enough of them. 75% of doctors have shifted the patients into these pain clinics. And one of the things that we want to do is educate doctors that they're not going to be arrested by the DEA just doing things like taking care of you. And also we're going to teach the doctors that complex patients like you, they can put in extra billings and be reimbursed for the extra time they spend. You're kind of our last person, and I want to explain to our audience that Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a congenital disease that people are born with, that the stuff holding your joints together is not properly made, and so all of your joints pop out at random whenever they feel like it. And I don't know if any of you in the audience have had a dislocated joint, but it really hurts.
Yeah.
And so people with EDS have these horrible, painful, and to stand by and watch somebody suffer like that and not give them pain medicine, who are we?
Yeah.
I do have one little technical question that I thought up the other day after I saw somebody with EDS, and she had a little 5-year-old girl with EDS is whether or not we should screen for EDS at the same time we screen for scoliosis in high school.
I think we should, because scoliosis comes hand in hand with EDS.
Yeah, and they can do there's little tests you do for hypermobility, and it would be nice to catch it early so that people could decide, amongst their family, whether or not they want a chance for EDS, and whether or not there's any genetic testing that can be done intrautero, big bag of worms. But I think might be nice to know when you're 16, you've got this. Not find out after you're a mother.
They do restrict people, which, I'm on the fence about that. I mean, I didn't know. I did high impact sports, and I trashed my body, and the boat accident I had completely destroyed my whole spine. So I'm in a really bad place. There's 14 different types. One type is massively deadly. It's a simple genetic test. The Baton test should be performed by all primary doctors. It's simple. It keys off what you need. Okay, you need to go see a geneticist, or we need to order a genetic test and see if this is what's going on, so you can, be prepared for what could happen to you.
At least you would know then. Yeah. At least you would know. And Jonelle, if you after the show, you can give her my email. And I don't care to give out my email anyway. My email is Thomas Kline, KLINE, Thomas Kline MD @gmail.com. So email me, because maybe we can start a little something going. I'm a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Many years ago, I was a pediatrician. And maybe we can start the ball rolling for simultaneous screening for EDS at the same. See, it would be an excuse, because we do automatic screening for scoliosis, so we just add that on. In other words, we wouldn't have to start a new program. Right. This is really a difficult disease to deal with. Surgery usually is a problem. We find that there are other difficulties with medicines, having funny reactions, things not working. So it's one of those rare painful diseases that previously were called chronic pain disease. No, this is not chronic pain disease. This is a real, awful, rare disease. And let me tell you, they give out Medal of Honor to people who come back from war zones, and people like you deserve the Medal of Honor.
Well, thank you, Stacy, so much for joining us here this evening and sharing your experiences. Dr. Kline, before we leave, I was just wondering, what do you see a similarity through all of the different people we spoke with tonight? Because they all have different diseases and stuff. What are they having the same issues of at their doctors?
The big issue is a severe, deep-seated prejudice and hatred. You talk to any black families, especially older folks, the grandparents of the civil rights movement, and they'll just shake their head. Yeah. This is a horrible prejudice. As a matter of fact, I was just thinking when people were talking, when you're accused of being a drug seeker, that's hate speech. Yeah. That's hate speech. That's like calling people the N-word. That's hate speech, And so, I actually wanted to find people, and if anybody's listening, you got my email now, some of the old timers that went through the movement, as it was called.
The civil rights movement, yep.
Civil rights movement, that how do you deal with the hatred and the prejudice?
Yeah.
There was a Martin Luther King, who saved the day and got Lyndon Johnson to pass the civil rights law, which nobody believed that Lyndon Johnson could do. And that's the reason Lyndon Johnson did not run for a second term, because he exhausted all his political money to pass the civil rights law. He had so many, markers out that they said, okay, we'll do this for you, but that's it. We're not going to support you ever again. And that's what it took. So you have to realize that you're being discriminated against, and maybe we should have some civil rights people on the show. How do you deal with it when somebody accuses you of being a dope fiend or a drug seeker, which is the new word? You're a drug seeker, and then plasters it all over your medical records. And we also need to, there is a procedure you can go through with HIPAA to get your records cleaned up, and I keep talking about it and not doing anything. So if you got somebody out there that was willing to look into this, look into the HIPAA law and find out what you do to cleanse your record, we'll put you on the air and you can tell people how to do it. Most of my time is spent, running down to the donut shop. So,
and making jellies and jams.
Making my jellies and jams, So really, we do need help. And that is definitely one topic that I think we could have a whole show on. How do you clean up these records? And what do you do when somebody's using hate speech?
Yeah. Dr. Kline, before we wrap up here, what is can you just tell us a little bit about your new website and what it is? Can you give the website address?
Yeah, we have a group of people. Anyone would like to join who's an editor, writer, researcher. It's called JATH, J-A-T-H, which is the abbreviation of the first name of my family, JATH. And you can find the website at JATH Educational, all one word, jatheducational.com. It's really an organization called JATH Educational Consortium, LLC. We are in the business of putting out information for people to use. None of it's copyrighted. People can use it, steal it, do whatever they want with it, but we all research the topics very thoroughly so that we are just putting out facts. We're not a policy organization. It's facts for people who make policy. And so some of the things we talk about on the show are the facts that we have that not a lot of other people have. For example, nobody can become addicted who's already taking an opiate. I mean, that's information that we have at JATH that nobody else seems to have, and we have a justification for it. And, people can read it. It's on my Medium page, which you can go to through my website. I kind of sound like I am selling my jellies and jams. But my website, in addition to the JATH website, because that's a whole group of people, but just me, I'm at Thomas Kline, MD, KLINE.com. And that's a little one-pager that you can go and read the other articles that we have written as a group or that I have written as solo. And these are examples of putting the word out there, and and people who are making policy, like legislators and stuff, are welcome to read them. But thank you for that spot, Janelle. It's just unabashed self-promotion here.
Well, I think there's a purpose for it, and there's a good reason. So people need to start knowing about this, because we're about selling education out there so people have the tools in their toolbox to make the best decisions for themselves, to have the best quality of life. And that's what we want to do. So make sure you check it out. Also, we have links to our website, from our website to that as well. Anything else before we go, or I'm going to wrap up?
No, we kind of have the same moniker that you do of telling the truth. So that's our business as well as yours. You were sort of the originator of it. So if you want to wrap up with that, I would just love to hear it again.
Okay. Well, just a reminder, every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for Keeping Up with Your Keeping You in the Family with host Dr. Margaret Aranda. She'll be discussing sleep or a lack of sleep for most of us dealing with rare and painful diseases. Also, every Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, DPP Rally Talk Show with Claudia. She'll be on this week. I don't know her guest yet. Also, next week, Kaylee Cresta, who you just heard, DPP Rally and myself have been working on a video montage of the May National Don't Punish Pain rallies. It will run off of Call 360's network channel, the YouTube channel DPP Rally Talk Show with Claudia. I will post about it everywhere so you know where to look for it. A big thank you to our audience for taking some time out of your evening to join us here at the Doctor's Corner for your daily dose of truth on Call 360 Network. I'm Jonelle Elgaway with Dr. KLINE, signing off until next Tuesday. Have a great evening, Call Nation.
This has been The Doctor's Corner with Dr. KLINE and JONELLE ELGAWAY. Copyright 2018. All rights reserved.